In 1932, an antique dealer in London opened a trunk of old documents he had purchased from a country estate and found something that should not have existed: a hand-drawn map on aged parchment, marked with coordinates, compass bearings, and a small notation in faded ink that read, "The secret is where the money is." The map was signed. The signature read, W. Kidd. William Kidd had been dead for 231 years. The dealer sold the map. The man who bought it mounted an expedition. The expedition found nothing. 3 subsequent owners of the map pursued their own searches. 2 of them died before they could publish their findings. 1 lost his entire fortune. The map itself passed through at least 11 documented owners between 1932 and 1983, and the paper trail of those owners reads less like a chain of title and more like a list of casualties. No one has ever found what the map points to. No one who has seriously searched for it has come away unharmed. This is the story of Captain Kidd's treasure, the map that may lead to it, and the question that 3 centuries of hunters have never been able to answer. Not just where the treasure is, but why everything connected to it seems to end badly for the people who go looking. To understand the treasure, you have to understand the man. William Kidd was born in Greenock, Scotland, sometime around 1654. By his 40s, he was a successful merchant captain based in New York, with a house on Pearl Street, a wife named Sarah, property, and a reputation for competence that was good enough to attract serious investors. He was not a desperate man or a man on the margins. He was a man of standing, which made what happened to him all the more instructive about the nature of standing in the age of empire. In 1695, Kidd was approached by a consortium of investors that included some of the most powerful men in England, among them Richard Coote, the Earl of Bellamont, who was about to become governor of New England. Their proposition was straightforward. They would fund a privateering voyage. Kidd would command it. His target would be pirates operating in the Indian Ocean, specifically the waters around Madagascar, where a new generation of raiders was disrupting the East India Company's trade routes. Kidd would hunt the pirates, take their ships as prizes, and split the proceeds with his backers. He had a royal commission. He had powerful protectors. He had everything he needed to succeed. The voyage destroyed him anyway. In January 1698, Kidd took the most significant prize of his journey, a large Armenian merchant vessel called the Quedagh Merchant, carrying a cargo of silk, gold, silver, and East India Company goods whose value has been estimated at anywhere between 70 and 400,000 pounds. The ship was sailing under a French pass, a document that made it a legitimate prize under the terms of Kidd's commission. He took it, believing he was operating entirely within his legal authority. By the time he returned to the Caribbean in 1699, the world had changed. The political winds in England had shifted. His backers had lost power. The East India Company had lobbied aggressively for his prosecution. He had been declared a pirate in absentia. The men who had sent him and promised to protect him were now among those calling loudest for his arrest, because protecting Kidd had become a liability they could not afford. He was arrested in Boston in 1699. He was transported to London. He was tried in a proceeding that lasted less than 2 days. The French passes that would have proven his prizes were legal were never produced in court. He was convicted of piracy and murder and sentenced to death. In the weeks before his execution, Kidd made the same offer to anyone who would carry it to the right ears. He had treasure buried, Specifically, he claimed somewhere between 40 and 50,000 pounds worth of gold, silver, and jewels cached at a location he would reveal in exchange for his life. The English government did not take the deal. On May 23, 1701, Kidd was led to the gallows at Execution Dock. The noose was placed around his neck. The trapdoor dropped. The rope snapped. Kidd fell to the ground alive. Under English legal tradition at the time, a broken rope was sometimes considered grounds for clemency, an intervention of Providence. The crowd at Execution Dock believed he would be freed. The hangman tied a new rope, led Kidd back up the steps, and hanged him a second time. This time the rope held. His body was tarred, locked in a custom-fitted iron cage, and suspended over the Thames at Tilbury Point, where it remained for 3 years, rotting in public view, as a warning to anyone considering a similar career. The treasure he had offered to trade for his life was never recovered, not officially, not completely. When Kidd was arrested in Boston, a portion of his cash was recovered at Gardiner's Island off the eastern tip of Long Island. Gold bars, silver pieces, jewels, silk, and spice totaling roughly 10,000 pounds in contemporary value. It was used as evidence at his trial and then absorbed into the Admiralty's accounts. But Kidd had claimed the full treasure was worth 4 to 5 times that amount. The manifest of the Quedagh merchant supported him. Something like 30 to 40,000 pounds worth of cargo remained unaccounted for after the Gardiner's Island recovery. Kidd said it was buried somewhere else. He said this clearly to multiple witnesses in the final months of his life. And then he was hanged, and the location went with him. What happened in the years immediately after Kidd's execution unsettled people who were paying attention. 3 of the officials most closely associated with his prosecution died within 5 years of the hanging. The Earl of Bellamont, who had arrested Kidd and delivered him to London as a prisoner, died in March 1701, the very same year as Kidd, of what his physicians recorded as a sudden violent seizure. 2 Admiralty officials who had handled the evidence died within 3 years of the verdict. None of these deaths were officially connected to Kidd. In an era before modern medicine, death came frequently and without warning. But the pattern was noticed. It appeared in private correspondence of the period, and it established, very early in the legend's development, a sense that something about Kidd's story was not finished. The treasure hunts began within a generation of his death. By the 1720s, Captain Kidd's buried gold was already the central narrative of Caribbean treasure hunting culture. Sailors told each other stories about islands in the Indian Ocean where the cache was hidden. Others placed it in the Caribbean, in Long Island Sound, in the coastal waters of New England. Robert Louis Stevenson drew on the Kidd legend directly when he wrote Treasure Island in 1883. The treasure map with compass bearings, the encoded directions, the skull marking the location. These were not generic pirate images invented by fiction. They were Kidd images already a century and a half old when Stevenson put them on paper. And then, in 1932, the map appeared. Hubert Palmer was a London antique dealer who had spent decades collecting documents related to the golden age of piracy. When he opened the trunk from the country estate and found the parchment, he recognized immediately what he might be holding. The document showed an island, unmistakably an island, with 2 hills, a harbor on the western side, rock formations on the northern coast, and a series of compass bearings marked in relation to those formations. The handwriting of the annotations was consistent with late 17th century English maritime notation. The signature at the lower right corner was clear: W. Kidd. Palmer authenticated the document using every method available to him. The parchment's age was consistent with the period. The ink chemistry matched 17th century formulations. The cartographic conventions, the specific way, distance, and direction were notated, matched those used by mariners of Kidd's era. The wear patterns on the document were consistent with a paper that had been folded, handled, and stored for a very long time. Every test Palmer could apply said the same thing. This was a genuine document from the right period. He spent the last 17 years of his life attempting to identify the island. He consulted cartographers, historians, and naval experts. He narrowed the possibilities to a handful of candidates in the Indian Ocean region, along the route Kidd had taken in 1697 and 1698. He organized a search. He died in 1949 before it could be completed. His estate passed to his brother, who continued the work. The brother died in 1953. He, too, had found nothing. The map passed through the hands of a researcher named Rupert Furneaux, who published the most thorough academic treatment of the Kidd mystery to that point in 1960. Furneaux identified the most likely island as a small landmass near the northern coast of Madagascar, an island whose topographic profile matched the map precisely when approached from the correct bearing. He organized an expedition. The expedition reached the island and searched it systematically. They found nothing. The island was later identified by a different researcher as categorically wrong. The real island, by that account, was 300 miles to the southeast. That researcher organized his own expedition. His expedition also found nothing. 7 different serious researchers have identified 7 different islands as the one shown on Kidd's map. All 7 have been searched. None has produced the treasure. 2 of the 7 researchers died before completing their analysis. 3 others spent amounts of money that materially damaged their financial situations. The remaining 2 published their findings, were criticized by other researchers, and quietly withdrew from the field. The most recent chapter in the story is the most technically sophisticated and, in some ways, the most troubling. A former intelligence analyst named Daniel Dobbins spent 15 years cross-referencing the Palmer map against historical shipping logs, colonial land surveys, and admiralty records before arriving at a conclusion that contradicted all previous research. The island, Dobbins argued, was not in the Indian Ocean at all. It was in the Caribbean, a small uninhabited cay in the southern Bahamas whose topographic profile matched the map's contour lines when the map was oriented to magnetic north, as it would have been in 1699, rather than true north as later researchers had assumed. Dobbins mounted an expedition to the cay in 2019. His team found what appeared to be deliberate stone formations on the island's southern slope, arrangements of rock that were geometrically precise in ways that natural processes do not produce. They found fragments of degraded timber in a location consistent with a capped shaft. They found a depression in the ground roughly 8 feet across, whose soil composition differed significantly from the surrounding area, suggesting historical excavation and refill. They found no gold, no silver, no artifacts that could be definitively dated to Kidd's period. Dobbins returned to the United States. He filed a licensing application with Bahamian authorities for a follow-up excavation. He began writing a book about his findings. In February of 2021, Daniel Dobbins died of a cardiac arrest at his home in Virginia. He was 63 years old. The licensing application was never completed. The book was never published. His research notes passed to his family, who have not released them publicly. The rational explanation for all of this is available and is probably correct. Treasure hunting attracts obsessives, and obsessives overextend themselves. The men who pursue kids' cash are typically older, typically stressed, typically spending money they cannot comfortably afford on expeditions that fail. The cardiac event rate in that demographic is high under normal circumstances. The appearance of a curse is survivorship bias. We remember the searchers who died because their deaths are dramatic, and we forget the ones who walked away disappointed and lived to old age. That explanation is almost certainly right, but the map is still unresolved, and there is one question about it that the rational explanation does not address. How did it get to that English country estate? Kidd was arrested in Boston in July 1699. He was held under guard until February 1700, when he was transported to London. He was imprisoned in the Tower of London from April 1700 until his trial in May 1701. He was under guard continuously from the moment of his arrest until the moment of his death. He had no documented opportunity to transmit documents to anyone in England. His correspondence from the Tower was monitored and has been partially preserved in the Admiralty records. The map does not appear in any of those records. There is no documented chain of custody for it between 1701 and 1932. It appears from nowhere, in a trunk, in a country estate, whose owners left no known connection to Kidd, to the Admiralty, to the sea, or to the golden age of piracy. Someone put it there. That person is not identified in any record that has been found. The document traveled from wherever Kidd created it to an English country estate, by a route that has left no trace in 230 years of historical inquiry. William Kidd stood on the scaffold at Execution Dock and offered to trade his secret for his life. The offer was refused. He was hanged twice, caged, and displayed over the river like a piece of evidence. The men who refused the deal died in the same year. The treasure stayed hidden. The map appeared 2 centuries later from nowhere, and every serious person who has followed it to its logical conclusion has encountered either nothing or death or both. The curse is probably not real. The pattern is probably coincidence. The map is probably a sophisticated forgery, or it points to an island that has been searched and found empty, or the treasure was quietly recovered centuries ago by someone who understood the value of silence. Probably. But the map is genuine by every test applied to it. The treasure documentation is genuine. The stone formations on that Bahamian quay were deliberately arranged by human hands, and the man who came closest to identifying their significance died before he could go back. 300 years after William Kidd was hanged for the second time, the 40,000 pounds he offered to trade for his life is still missing, still documented, still pointing through a map that appeared from nowhere, at an island that nobody can agree on. The secret is where the money is. That is what the map says. Somewhere out there, on an island that 7 researchers have identified as 7 different places, that is still true. The secret is still the money, and the money is still the secret, and the map is still unsigned by anyone willing to lead you there and guarantee you survive the trip.